My name's Anne from Orchid Systems, and today I'm going to be discussing budgeting and forecasting using Orchid's modules. For those of you who don't know, Orchid have been a developer of Sage 300 add-on solutions since 1993. We're based in Sydney, Australia. To date, we have over 5,000 companies using our modules, and on average, each site is using 2 modules. All solutions we have developed are through the Sage 300 SDK, and what that means for you is that they look and feel like a Sage 300 module, they install and activate in the same way, and they support the same utilities like dump and load and using crystal reports against the database. Over the years, we've had a very close working relationship with Sage development team, with some of our modules being OEM and or gold certified. And we believe this helps us a great deal with our insights into the Sage 300 system. At this stage, we have a large number of modules falling into these broad categories: collaboration and intelligence. And in that area today, I'm going to be discussing Info Explorer. We also have a couple of modules that support automation and productivity when using Sage 300. And in the tailoring your system and integration, we have extender optional tables and data views. And part of the discussion today is going to be on using optional tables for your budgeting and forecasting. In the streamlining financial processes, we have EFT, inter-entity transactions and inter-entity trade, and a couple of modules in the operations management, bin tracking and return material authorizations. This is just a screenshot to show our modules embedded in the Sage 300 desktop. And for all intents and purposes, they appear like a Sage 300 core module. Today, my topic is going to be on budgeting and forecasting. And I'm going to be using 2 of our tools, Info Explorer with the Writeback features, which allows you to update from the analysis tool back into your budget area, and optional tables. With Info Explorer, I'm going to demonstrate top-down budgeting. So we have a high-level budget figure, and we're going to do percentage increase, percentage decrease from the top. And Info Explorer will help us spread the budget figure back to all the underlying data records. But I'm also going to demonstrate using optional tables. Optional tables allow you to create extra tables within Sage 300 and comes with an Excel add-in. So you can update these figures from Excel, and it's typically a good tool to use when budgeting, when entering your budgets from the bottom up. So Info Explorer is our module which allows you to slice and dice data, any data, Sage 300 data, but in fact any ODBC or SQL database. It allows you to have one query and to have multiple views on that query. So the user can decide to slice and dice, filter, change rows, change columns, and see the data that they want to do without having to run multiple reports just to get a different grouping, sorting, or calculation, add a new total or a new calculation on the data that they're viewing. And we also have built into Info Explorer the ability to enter and forecast or project or spread budget data. And this budget data can then be written back to the underlying Sage 300 tables. I've pretty much run through those points, and this screen just a high-level shot of Info Explorer, the ability to drill down into your underlying Sage 300 data entry screen, but also the ability to create work sets and budget. And rather than talking to a slide, I'll get in shortly and show you how this all works. On the optional table side, we have the ability to add additional optional fields using the Sage 300 optional fields ability and attach those optional fields to any area in Sage 300 to allow you to store additional KPIs or budgets, information in the Sage 300 database where you need it, rather than in Excel or an external database, because then it's there in the same place for your reporting, for example, actual versus budget reporting. So it allows you to use these optional fields against tables which don't currently have optional fields. For example, the salesperson or the location table doesn't have optional fields, but you might want to keep KPIs or budget information at that level. But it also allows you to store information against a combination of tables. So for example, you could budget by customer and item and salesperson, or might be just salesperson and category. You can also store budget information at a lower level than the GL account. At the moment, GL caters for budgeting at a GL account level, but you might be using optional fields, for example, transactional optional fields, for example, salesperson, to flow through to the GL for your actuals. And it would be ideal to budget at that same level. So using optional tables, you could budget at a general ledger account and optional field level. And optional tables comes with an Excel add-in, which I'll be demonstrating to you, which allows you to enter your budget data in Excel or use Excel to spread, forecast, or calculate your budgeted values. And then at a click of a button, it can update back into into the optional tables for analysis using Info Explorer or Crystal reports, whichever way you want to analyze that data. So I'm just going to flick across into the Sage 300. And apologies for the ordering of these icons. I did have them all in order, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and for some reason it keeps reordering my icons. Apologies. But all I've done here is draw together a number of icons, either from General Ledger or from Information Manager or indeed Info Explorer, just to organize my budget procedures in a single process. First, what I'm going to show you is the capture and maintenance and updating of a GL forecast. So this is capturing budget data at a GL level. And initially, I used the FR Statement Designer to create myself some budget entry templates, which I'm then going to use, distribute to everyone, perhaps one Excel spreadsheet per department level, per department manager. And then once those the budget data has been captured, then I'm going to update it using Info Explorer. First of all, I'm going to show you this, the result of this, and then I'll go and show you the setup and how we created the info set for this particular information. So just to show you my forecast spreadsheet, initially I've had a financial statement which collected together all the account groups 15 and 19, and I ran this to create a spreadsheet for each division. So these are just, in my particular scenario, this is going to show me my 2019 actuals, my 2020 actuals, because this particular data is in the first few months. And then I'm going to have a data entry column for actually 2020 budget, where I'm asking people to enter the annual budget. And then using these formulas, I'm just going to spread the budget to 12 different months. And then ultimately using the optional tables the Excel add-in, I'm going to update these figures back through to my budget info set. So previously I had run that statement designer and created my Excel template to be distributed and and data entered. So I'm just going to open up that particular spreadsheet. So this is using Information Manager, the information entry from Excel. So very similar to the financial report writer, it opens up a version of Excel with a macro behind it, which allows you to read and write the information via formulas back through to your Sage 300 data. So opening up the spreadsheet that I had created using my financial reporter, but if I had created this spreadsheet using Sage Intelligence, so I could have used Sage Intelligence to get my 2019 actuals, my 2020 actuals so far, and a column for my 2020 budget. So I could have done that. The only difference is I would have had to manually add these formulas after the spreadsheet was created by Sage Intelligence. So previously I have entered my budget figures. So my annual budget for sales for Division 100-1 is going to be 4 million, etc. I've entered these figures. My formula spread it out to 1/12 per month, but I could have used some sort of spreading method and used Excel to spread that in a more suitable way. And what FR did for me, or what I would have to manually add after generating the spreadsheet, is these Information Manager Excel add-in formulas to write this information back into my GL forecast info set. So when I go to the add-ins, here you can see I've got my financial report designer, but here I've got my Information Manager toolbar. I can read information from Sage 300 back into the spreadsheet, or I could write information from the spreadsheet back into Sage 300. And a few formula wizards, which helps you create these formulas. So if I was to amend these figures, or if I just want to send these figures back in as they are, all I need to do is click Update, and it will bundle up all those formulas and write those back through into the info set. So back in Sage 300, I now have these forecast figures for this particular range of accounts for my Division 100. And similarly, I would do the same exercise for 200 and as many divisions that I have. So what's underlying this, and what's happened in that process, or what I did previously before using that spreadsheet, is I would have gone into Information Manager setup. I would have created an info set linked to my general ledger. So using my info set called Forecast, I have linked it through to my general ledger, and I had previously defined an optional field called Budget Value in my Common Services, and linked it through to my Forecast info set. So what the Excel add-in was doing was updating the Forecast info set. And I could come and have a look at those records. The option that I was using in the budgeting was this information entry from Excel, but I can also enter the information through a Sage 300 style screen, or use import-export in the normal way. So if I just filter for some forecast data, here you can see the 12 monthly figures for this particular account that had been updated, and so on for the other accounts. So this has been updated from the Excel add-in. And as I was saying, I could just enter in here, or I could use import from an Excel template. But using the Excel add-in, it saves you having to reformat the import in a particular way for the Sage 300 imports. So once I've got my data now sitting in my info set, my choice, I could either use an Info Explorer cube. to view that data, because I would have collected it department by department, and now I want to view that data consolidated. So I want to see 100, 200, and 300 all consolidated together and have a look at the overall effect. So I could either use a cube back on the info set, or I could use a cube on the GL budget. But before I do that, I need to just upload that information from the info set through to GL. So using this upload macro, which gets distributed with Information Manager, you can select info sets and which optional field, and you can select which budget set you want to send it to and what fiscal year period that you want to do. If you have budgeted in positive values and you want to switch your credits, your sales to credits, you can do so. And clicking process would update the general ledger fiscal set that you've chosen from the info set that you have. So this implies that you could have as many forecasts as you want. Perhaps you forecast every month, so you've got 12 forecasts, but at any one time you could send 5 of them to the 5 budget sets for reporting actual versus budget. But you could have, if you had wanted, rather than, and then the next step is I'm going to use this Info Explorer cube, which is reading through my GL budget set 1, and I can refresh that and look at the budget I've collected at a higher level. So opening up the cube, which is designed to bring in 2 years of data. I've got 2019 actuals, 2020 so far actuals, so actuals to date. So I've got my version, which is actual and budget. I've got my years, which is 2019 and 2020, and I've got my account groups, my account, and in this particular case, the cube is split into region. The general ledger account is the natural account, division, and region. So I could have any of those as my rows and columns for reporting. Here on this particular view, I'm only looking at actuals, but you could, be looking at actual versus budget by selecting budget version and dragging it down as a row or a column. I can have multiple views on this data. So here, for example, I'm seeing all my accounts, again, just my actuals, but by dragging down this dimension, I could be seeing actual versus budget. As I have done in this particular case, I've got a view which is just my account groups for revenue and cost of sales. And I'm currently looking at 2019's actual and budget. 2020's actual, but you notice no budget. The only reason for that is I refreshed this cube prior to doing the update from my Excel add-in, and then running the GL budget upload. So I could, if I want, go refresh, and I would see the budget figures that I had entered and updated from GL. But before I do that, or what I really want to demonstrate is you could also use Info Explorer to gather that data from a bottom-up area. You could go account by account, period by period, and enter the data, or you could use Info Explorer to do calculations and spread that data for you. So in my scenario, what I'm going to do is actually create, or let's say recreate, the budget that I've just updated from the Excel spreadsheet. I'm going to create it based on 2019's actuals, and then I'm going to apply a percentage increase and then use that as my budget or my starting position for my GL budget or forecast, which is what I'm currently working on. So in order to do that, I need an Info Explorer Writeback license, which enables this Workset tab. And what Worksets allows you to do is to create a new workset. You can create as many worksets as you want, And a work set is really like a copy-paste special value from your Excel spreadsheet, on an Excel spreadsheet. So if I create new here, it creates me a new work set. It's called it work set 1. And if I had multiple work sets, then I would select which work set I'm currently looking at. I'm looking at work set 1. I might say, well, let's rename this and let's call it forecast, because it's the first forecast that I'm doing for the year. And then I'm going to say, well, I would like to take 2019's actuals and start my budget off with 2019's actuals. So in my work set and in a view which shows me all the numbers that I want to populate across, so I'm now looking at my total sales for all, for all divisions, all regions. I could do a view per region and per division and only update a division or region at a time. But in my case, I'm looking at my total sales and my total cost of sales for all divisions, for all regions. So this is sample data. So we've got 2 divisions and 4 regions. So in my case, I'm going to start off my budget at minus 15 million. So it's my total of my sales less cost of sales is going to be minus 15 million. So what I need to do is just enter that in my budget figure. But when you're entering a total, for example, I'm going to be entering the result of my sales minus cost of sales. When you're doing something at a high level like that, what you need to do is tell the cube how to spread that total back into the underlying records that make it up. So if I just keyed in a value now and told to spread it proportionately based on the current cell value, it's going to spread it based on zeros, which is effectively going to spread 0 back into the entire budget. But if I was to change and tell it to spread, instead of matching my fiscal year, so instead of matching to 2020, I'm going to say spread based on 2019 and take my version and spread based on actual. So now if I enter my 15 million, and press enter, it will spread that number back across the accounts that make up my make up my forecast. So in this case, sales and cost of sales, but it spread it back using the weighting that I found in 2019 actual. So these two totals are the same. And you can see by applying conditional formatting, so in my my styles, I have created a style which is called amended worksheet, which is got this pinkish background with black font, and I've applied that to all cells which have an amended workset data. So the amended data has now been shown as pink. So it hasn't just amended my 4,000 sales. What it's done is broken that number down into all the divisions that made up the 4,000 accounts. So you can see it spread 5 and 4 and 6 million to those accounts which don't have a division. And it spread that number back down into the region as well. So underlying each of the divisions, I've got the 2 regions and the null region. So in some cases, well, actually in quite a few cases in that sales account, it was just spread back to the null division. But here's a better example where it's been spread back into northern, southern, and eastern, and giving us the commercial total of minus 204. Now I could do further amendments, and although I'm looking at this data on an annual basis, if I was to drag my fiscal period down, you would see all those amounts are also split out by fiscal period. So just dropping back our fiscal period, so and division and region, so we can see the the entire amount more readily. So now what I could do is say, well, it's not going to be 15 million, it's going to be 10% higher or 10% lower, or I could perhaps adjust my sales by 10% up and my cost of sales by 10% down. But to do that, I would change my spreading method. Instead of spreading proportionately based on the current value, I would be entering a percentage increase or decrease. So if I change that to a percentage increase, and here type 10, which is 10% up, it would spread the sales amounts by 10% up, and perhaps on my cost of sales, I would do a minus 10%, which would take my, or let's do 15%, which will take my cost of sales down by 15%. Now giving me a better sales list of cost of sales. Now I could save this cube, and it would remember all those numbers in this particular work set. I could reopen tomorrow, do a few more revisions. If I wanted to, I could create a new work set, forecast 1, that would go back to the original figures of 2020 budget being 0, and I could do another revision to see what those figures look like. But at some stage, this is going to be finalized. If I could send this cube to my colleague, if they also have a work set or Writeback license, they would be able to view these amended figures as well. But at some stage, when these figures are finalized, what you can do is go Writeback. And Writeback would bundle up the underlying changed records and write them back, in this case, to my GL fiscal set 1 for the year 2020. So if I was to go back now into GL, my GL budgets would be these figures, although my info set was still my original forecast that I updated from the spreadsheet. But just as I have a spreadsheet, which is, a cube, which is allowing me to view and amend GL budget at a GL level, I could have had this particular cube looking at my info set, and these numbers that I could be updating would have been those info set records if I had wanted to do it as part of an info set before updating my GL. So you can do it at either level, depending which suits the processes that you have. So that is the first budget process that I wanted to show you. And I showed you the info set sitting behind it, which sits behind the first update that we did. It was the GL forecast, which allowed us to capture information, budget information, a single budget value at a general ledger account level. And that's what allowed us to update the info set from the Excel add-in. The second example that I'm going to show you is based on the assumption that you want to capture customer item budgets. So in this particular case, I'm going to use a info set called budget. And this info set is linked to my AR customer and my IC item. So what I'm saying and what I'm defining here is when I enter budget data for my info set called budget, I'm going to be, I need to define a customer and an item. And then because I have selected this option here, I'll be able to enter 12 monthly forecasts, or I could enter 4 quarterly forecasts or budgets, or I could in fact do it daily basis. It actually allows you date-driven 365 records per customer item combination. But in my case, I've chosen the first of the month because I want a monthly budget. And at the customer item level, my configuration, I want to keep track of a budgeted cost, a budgeted quantity, and a budgeted value. So I'll calculate margin based on the cost, quantity, and value. So once you've created that info set, just with as you could with the GL forecast, I could go to Information Manager Transactions, and I could enter this either from Excel, which I will show you shortly, or I could go into my Information Manager grid entry, and I could say, let's go ahead and capture some budget information. And I'm going to select a customer and item that I haven't already budgeted for. So we could see, let's say I'm going to budget for this customer Bargain Mart. And which item do I want to budget for? So we'll start off with the A11A30, 1030. And I could go ahead and enter the budget data. So for the 1st of January 2020, it defaults my fiscal year and period. Let's say my budgeted cost is $1,000, my quantity is 100, and my budgeted value is $3,000. And I could go ahead, add my February budget and so on. Then I could cycle through and do additional items or additional customers, and I can import from a formatted Excel spreadsheet. But here again, we can also use our Excel add-in to update this information. So either by launching the icon from here or going back to my budgeting menu where I just put a copy of that particular icon here, I can launch the information entry from Excel. Like the financial report writer, it starts up the Excel add-in, which you need to have first reduced your macro security in Excel to allow it to run macros, and you need to give that OCX confirm that it's a trusted OCX, which gives you the add-in read and write plus the formula, the wizards which help you edit in the formulas. And just opening up the a spreadsheet that gets distributed with Info Manager is this particular spreadsheet, and let me make it a little bit bigger. So this was my particular choice and my design, that I wanted people to enter the sales value here, the sales quantity here, and the sales cost, the budgeted cost here. And yes, I could have used Excel to, based on the quantity, multiply by a price list and multiply by a factor to give us the cost, and multiply just by the price list to give us the sales value. However you choose to get these figures, yes, I probably should have started off with an export from an Excel, from a Crystal report to give me last year's actuals to help me with this process, to help me with a start-off figure, or just depending on your budget procedures, whether you give people blank spreadsheets or give them last year's actuals to start off. And so this is assuming that it's the salesperson who's responsible for this group of customers and this group of items, because mine's a customer item budget. But had I designed it as a customer category or a salesperson category or a location category, and I'm just using examples of 2 key fields, but it could have been 3 key fields, for example, customer, category, and location. So you would design the spreadsheet that makes sense. So I've got my customer code in A, my item code in D, and then from G through to R, I'm asking people to enter the sales budget or the sales quantity or the sales cost. So once these figures have been entered, and what we have normally in hidden columns here is the formulas to write this information back through into my info set. So this time I'll just take a quick look at the formula. So what this is saying is, if I follow through those colored cells that Excel's highlighting for me, what it's saying is EB is a 2-letter code for Information Manager. What it's saying is take the value that I've got in cell G8, which is currently sitting at 2,000, and write it back into my optional field called bud value, into my info set called budget, get my customer from A8, my item from D8, and from U6 get my the date, which is 2020-0101, and G5 and G6 get my fiscal year and fiscal period, and so on. So for the whole 12 months for the first customer item combination, and then going down the grid, this will be for the second customer and item and so on. But these cells down here would now be looking not at my optional field called bud value, but looking at my optional field called bud quantity. Otherwise, the same cells are being referenced. And finally, down in the cost area, we're now updating an info set called bud cost. Sorry, an info set called budget, and an optional field called bud cost. So this time, if I amend the figures, or if these are the figures that I want to go with, this time when I go to my add-ins and write, it's going to update my info set called budget using the customer and item, and then the budget sales value, budget quantity, and budget cost for 2020. So a few more numbers to update from this particular spreadsheet. But once it's finished, if we go back into our Sage 300, we will find these figures in our info set updated for us. And yes, we could have copied and pasted and changed the format of this and done a normal file import from Excel, but it just saves you formatting that particular information. So if I just close this down and go back to my Sage desktop. So having done that import from the spreadsheet, again, I could go to my normal data entry from the grid, and I could look at some of that budget information. So if I was to filter on, here's some budget for 1100. So 1100, 811030, here's my budgeted cost, budgeted quantity, and budgeted value as optional fields attached to this particular info set. So there is no, unlike the GL where you can put GL budgets back into the GL info, back into the GL budget, there is no natural home for a budget at a customer and item level. So this would be the place that you would report from and or do amendments to. But you can have design an Info Explorer cube, and there is one up on the website which does this, which allows you to manipulate that data, either analyze the data by looking at your actual versus budget using the cube. So this cube is designed to show you your sales by customer and item. So we have the customer and item sales for sales analysis purposes, but also as facts, we've got our budgeted cost, budgeted quantity, budgeted sales, and a calculated budgeted margin. So we can either be looking at on our actuals, cost, quantity, net sales, and margin, or our budget figures, which I am doing now. So it's very similar to the GL process. If you wanted to, you could have you could use the cube to do manipulations on that particular budget as well. So I've got a view here which is currently looking at my A1 accessories by item. So this is my budgeted quantity, budgeted cost, budgeted sales, summed up by customer. If I did want to see it broken down by item, just like dragging my region and my divisions around, I could then see how this breaks down to our individual items within the customer, within the category. And like our GL, we could do our adjustments at any particular level. I could change my budgeted quantity at this level, so for the total accessories, and tell it to spread it back across the current spread, or use one of the other spreading methods if we wanted to. But first, initially, to do that, you need to go into the work sets, create yourself a new work set. Maybe you would rename that one budget, and now I could go ahead and change these quantities. So if I did want to work just within my existing view, and I did want to update these particular quantities and spread it to the items that that I'm currently looking at, I could say, well, it's not $1 million of or 1.4, it's 2 million of quantity. But in this particular case, I'm not connected through to a price list or a factor to give me my calculated budgeted cost and my calculated budgeted sales. So if you were doing this, you would need to change them all proportionately the way that you would have done it in the Excel spreadsheet initially. So just to make it a little bit easier, let's go ahead and let's change our budgeted cost, and we will tell it to spread it back proportionately based on the current value. So I'm actually going to just be manipulating these for customers' budget or cost of budget at this stage. So let's say I change this to 100,000 and press enter. So it's going to spread that 100,000 proportionately back only to those customers and underlying it those items that have a budgeted cost. And in the same way, I'm going to change my budgeted sales. That's quite a good margin, isn't it? I'm going to change my budgeted sales, let's say, to 3 million and spread that back. So we've now got a massive margin there. And if those are the figures that I wanted to go with, again, in a similar way, I could go right back, and that's going to write that back this time, not to my GL budget, but to my info set that does this underlying, that supports this particular cube that I'm looking at. So those were the main features that I wanted to run through in both Info Explorer for budgeting and our info sets for budgeting. So I'm going to open it up to questions, and you're all on mute. So if you can use the question box that you've got in your GoToMeeting toolbar. And I can see I've got a spreadsheet question here from Stan. Can the spreadsheets be updated by users who are not logged into Sage? So yes, Stan, when you're using the Excel add-in and the Excel template, the formulas are in hidden cells, and you only need to be connected to Sage when you click on the update button. Until then, while you're still entering the data, those spreadsheets can be distributed to non-Sage 300 users, or they don't have to be connected to Sage at the time to fill in those spreadsheets. So we have customers who use FR to generate the 50 divisional data entry spreadsheets. Those get distributed using Report Runner, are automatically emailed to all the divisional managers, where they would enter the budget, but they don't have the ability to write back into the info set. They would send it back to the budget coordinator, who would just have a quick look at the spreadsheet, make sure it makes sense, and they would be the ones who collect update. So it's only them who have to open that spreadsheet using the Excel add-in and click write. Well, if there's no other questions, thank you very much for attending this session. And we will be distributing this recording in the next couple of days. Thank you.